This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Marvel Studios Assembled, the Making of Loki.
At the end of the first day, I cannot believe that I'm doing this. I literally cannot believe it's happening. I first wore this costume 10 years ago. I can't believe I'm still wearing it. And I'm so excited about this show. I'm so grateful to all of you for everything you're going to do on it. So thank you for day one of 849, and onward we march.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders, to the Marvel Studios Assembled, the Making of Loki. I hope you're ready to do the hokey Loki as we get into this, our final episode of the first season. It's very nice to say that. The first season of Loki. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek, dying of heat stroke.
And I am doing the hokey pokey and I'm turning about. I am Chris. Because that's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. Well, I think I'm probably going slightly low-key in the heat, to be honest, at the moment. We are, yes, embroiled in a heat wave here in Ireland at the moment. It's great. I look like a beetroot because I've been enjoying the sun, but it is very, very humid, but great nonetheless. Yeah. So, of course, instead of being outside in the fresh air, we are melting away in our little office to deliver Marvel Studios Assembled. Yes. Making of Loki, we've done The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we've done WandaVision, but this time we get into the Making of Loki, as well as deliver the results of the Loki pub quiz.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Some really tough old questions there, a lot of variation running around in the answers, and indeed some that we would have got wrong as well if we hadn't gone back and watched the episodes for a second time. So a lot of toughies in this pub quiz for Loki.
It's only 6 questions, and we got to make sure it's tough so we can actually knock out a few people, because we can't just have everybody in the pub quiz. That's the whole point, isn't it? Because you never have a 12-way tie.
Everyone is a winner, just not in the traditional sense.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're winning with the fun and engagement of taking part in the TV podcast industry's pub quiz.
Yes, and just to say, fellow Defenders, the Defenders podcast does not condone knocking out our fellow Defenders.
And neither does TV Podcast Industries. Excellent. Well, let's get into it. The discussion about the making of documentary. We have the pub quiz, and we will have some feedback from our wonderful fellow Defenders as well. I want to talk about at the end of the episode.
Yes. Before we get into it, remember, there is What If, Marvel's What If is coming up on the 11th of August. So please head on over and subscribe to TV Podcast Industries. You can head to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can get any magical or mysterious podcast catcher of your choice to listen to our dulcet tones. And of course, you can share that around. Just share the love, spread the love, and so get loads of people enjoying the Marvel TV universe, I guess, as we build to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I guess.
I completely forgot that was what we did all the way up to the original Doctor Strange movie. Everything was building to that, wasn't it? And no matter what it was.
It was.
I think even Gotham was building to Doctor Strange at that point.
My house is building to Doctor
And so will ours when I put in the seal of Vishanti window. Just to freak out all the neighbours who think we're a cult.
That would be great in a suburb in Dublin.
It's like, what's that? Ooh, the Sorcerer Supreme's lair. It is.
Interesting.
How did you get that?
But also, don't forget, fellow Defenders, we are at the end of this. So if you would like to, and you've liked what you've listened to, why not head over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, where for a single Marvel dollar, or a reoccurring fee, you can also support this podcast, keep the servers running. Our director and editor supreme, Derek O'Neill, you'll be able to also keep him in coffee and wine as we move towards What If. It is a great way to keep our hamster, also known as Derek O'Neill Jr., it's just Derek as well, the server's going. So yes, any support patron is always appreciated. You can also head on over for a single payment to buymeacoffee.com/TVPI, where you can actually buy him a coffee to edit through each edit. Mm-hmm. It is always supported. It is great to have you. We really do appreciate that. And we are moving into what can only be described as a multiverse of 2021 madness episodes, where we get What If. You'll have the Eternals, Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, all before Christmas. And Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. How can I even forget that? That is coming too.
I can't wait for Shang-Chi. That's going to be really, really good too. Yeah. And I think that's coming up first, isn't it?
And there's going to be Spider-Man as well.
Yep.
Oh, and you look at all the great content that you have coming down the way. So why not head over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, guys, we've still got a couple more weeks of The Bad Batch, which we're covering as well. Star Wars The Bad Batch, about 5 more weeks of that, which will be really, really good. I think if you do go to buymeacoffee.com/TVPI and send me a coffee over there, it might end up being an iced coffee.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you want to share any thoughts about any of the shows that we're covering, you can also email us at any time to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. We do read everything that comes in to our email there. So if you want to talk about anything we've covered, you can email us over there as well. Love hearing from you.
Yes, we do. And don't forget, you can also head over to facebook.com/group/TV Podcast Industries, where you can join our discussion groups, our spoiler posts, and the fun, raucous fun that is our groups. Yes, I said fun and raucous twice in the sentence. It's that fun and that raucous.
Okay.
But you know what's even more raucous? Our discussions of Marvel Studios Assembled, the Making of Loki. Let's jump into it. Do you want to tell us who gave us what with the episode details, Derek?
Sure, yeah. Represented here are obviously all of the main cast. We also have director and executive producer Kate Herron, lead writer and executive producer Michael Waldron. We also have director of photography Autumn Darald Arkapal. We have production designer Kazra Farhani and costume designer Christine Wada, amongst many, many other folks from behind the scenes on Loki. Interestingly, of course, we don't have a synopsis for this episode. So, John, do we want to jump straight into the variants for this episode? Our 5 things we want to talk about from this episode.
Well, I could just say they made it.
They made it. Yep, there you go.
And then they showed it.
Yeah,
that's my synopsis.
That's exactly what I wrote. It was great. Ladies and gentlemen, behind the curtain, as we were doing that recording, I literally went, synopsis. It's a making of. That is the synopsis for this episode.
It really, really is. But let's get into our top 5 variants. Variant 1. A decade-long journey.
Yeah.
Yes, this was the making of Tom Hiddleston.
Kind of. He did have a lot of work beforehand and had worked with Kenneth Branagh beforehand, which is where he got the knowledge about Thor coming up. I suppose that this is a good framing device they have here. We haven't had this in either of the other shows. Tom Hiddleston himself is doing the voiceover. He's doing the kind of introduction. He's doing the kind of guide through and talking very specifically about his time, trying out to play Thor back in Kenneth Branagh's original Thor. That's quite interesting. You get to see the actual tape of him dressed up in his version of the Thor costume.
Yeah, seeing him with a blonde wig and the red cape was hilarious. Just that was fascinating that he played for or he auditioned for both parts.
Yeah. I'd heard of that.
Yeah.
I had heard that story before. I'd never seen that scene.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see that they have kept that around. And so I'm assuming it's probably in some of the other making ofs, but it was there. But this was fun. This was an interesting kind of review, like a trip down memory lane, I suppose. The framing, what you talk about, Derek, is huge. That framing is massive because this, I get the feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? As we are getting further into this MCU Disney Plus kind of mini universe, same universe, but like the TV shows, they are doubling down I get it. They were slightly probably hesitant coming into this thing. They put the money down. They filmed the shows, but I can understand. There's always it is a new business risk for this company.
Yeah.
But they seem to be really backing this. Like the social media marketing and presence as a whole for each of the shows has grown. What If is being touted huge. And then these making ofs as well, to a degree, have grown and grown. Now, we'll discuss what if it's lacking in any sort of way. But it was interesting to see the actual star of the show narrate this aspect of it.
Well, you did say correct you if you're wrong. And it's not that you're wrong at all. But remember, in this case, Tom Hiddleston is an executive producer of this TV show. Yeah. There's one of the things that they call out a couple of times. Some of the members of the cast call out his Loki training sessions, effectively, where he was distilling all of the information about his version of Loki, all his knowledge about Loki, to a bunch of the cast to kind of tell them
his Loki lectures,
of course, the double L. But that's partly because he's executive producer of the show and he wants everybody to get the concept so that it can be really successful. So you're absolutely right in the fact that they are definitely doubling down on this is a massive character for Marvel. They don't want to get it wrong, but he's got a vested interest in this. He's been involved in it for 10 years and he really wants to make sure everybody gets what he's going for with his version of Loki, I think. So in the same way, obviously, the writer wants to get across what they're doing, director wants to get across what they're doing, but this really felt like Hiddleston himself had a really big interest in making sure that this came across as his product as well.
And I think as well, you saying like such a big character, that whole San Diego Comic-Con Hall H moment there, I'd just forgotten about that, but just, coming really hot off the heels of the Avengers, the first Avengers, it was a really, really big moment. And
say my name!
Yeah, it was,
Absolutely
you just
massive.
forgot how sort of big that was for Marvel, coming off a big movie like Avengers, but that character being the character that, in that sense, was given that opportunity, in Hall H of San Diego Comic-Con.
It is really difficult for our American listeners. It is really difficult for Irish and English people to say Hall H. Americans call it H, so Hall H sounds much easier. It flows off the tongue, doesn't it? A bit easier done. Yes, Hall H, as we would say over here. But yes, amazing moment.
I think H is actually the proper pronunciation.
They did have trees. I agree. And actually, it's a shame that we are not getting, because we are recording this on the 22nd of July, the week of San Diego Comic-Con online this week. It's coming up this weekend, it'll be starting into next week. And there is no Hall H panel. There is no Marvel DC panel. And it's so interesting. So that beautiful shot from when he came out, to then also just remembering, 2 years ago, we had the one where they announced Blade and the MCU film, the TV shows and stuff. They really are, every now and again, you need to take a step back and remember, this has been a decade of nerds nirvana to a degree somewhat, where they've really shown us the quality of this.
Well, even Iron Man itself was launched in a side room off San Diego Comic-Con. That was the first big announcement of it, was all the major actors. Now you wouldn't be able to get them all in a room in the way that they were doing it at the time, but they were all right there with a very small crowd of people going, Marvel's making a comic book movie, and everybody going, oh, comic book movies are terrible. So San Diego Comic-Con has always been massively important to the movies, and New York Comic-Con has always been massively important to the TV shows as well. So hopefully both returning at some point in the future. But anything else about the decade-long journey of Loki himself?
The thing I did quite like as well, saying about how Tom Hiddleston was narrating, doing the voiceovers and so on, and the series was about time. I did like the whole thing right at the beginning, certainly where, he distilled the 299 days of production, however many hours, however many minutes, into, that it basically 6 episodes or 280 minutes of programming, and then and into this 1 hour of a making of. I thought that was quite nice because it just shows you the work that goes in to making, these TV shows, the time, and effort of, the cast, the crew, and, the writers, producers, designers, you name it, how much time goes into that. So you could even you could quadruple the number of, people hours effectively onto that. And it just shows you the amount of time and effort it takes. And I thought that was really, really interesting. Yeah. I thought that really sprang out at me.
Because that was from day one on set as well. I must say I was really surprised to hear the date that he gave there. The day one on set was the start of February 2020, which is a lot later than I'd heard before. I thought they started filming in 2019 and then shut down for COVID, but they must have shut down for COVID like within 2 or 3 weeks of the start of that production. So they were very early on, and one of the things that kind of is coming out, we had mentioned, in the Falcon and Winter Soldier and WandaVision that there had been impacts from COVID and filming had stopped on both of those, but you didn't really see it on screen very much. In here, absolutely seeing the filming of, during COVID times. You see everybody wearing masks the whole time. Even the director, Kate Herron, when speaking to Tom Hiddleston is wearing her mask the whole time. So, this does feel like it ended production significantly later than all the rest of them. I don't know. I just had it in my head that this was one of the first to start production given how complex it was. And actually, the finishing of production was just a few weeks filming, but it turns out, that it was filming a lot later than I thought.
Yeah, we know that we see the beautiful scene where Tom is giving his speech with his Tesseract birthday cake, on the day of his 40th birthday as they start production. I'd say they probably only got 2-3 weeks max, as you said. Yeah. Like, if they're lucky, and then they should. Yeah, like, now the question I have is, did that have any impact on what we were actually given? Story and or location set building? Because while some of the other shows had to do reshoots, post-COVID time, a lot of that was already pre-locked. Yeah. What we were seeing here is, no, this was filmed post, where you had some new, to be fair, stringent COVID practice policies on sets.
Yeah, and still do now, absolutely. A lot of producers and actors talking about producing shows now is still very different than it was 2 years ago. Do you know, thinking back on some of the episode by episode reviews that some of the other sites have done, the ones that were giving it really poor scores for the first few episodes and then amazing scores at the end when they realized the story, I do remember a lot of criticism of, wow, the amount of times characters are sitting down opposite each other at a table and talking through what's going on. And you go, maybe that was COVID. Like, it still seems to be considered the best of the 3 shows overall from a lot of, let's say, news outlets and review outlets are saying this is the best or the favorite of those. So I don't think it's impacted overall on the reception of it. But if you think back to the amount of scenes where all of the major characters are sitting down talking to one other person and only one other person, you probably think that's to do with COVID, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, also just that this has a lot of sets, even on Lamentis, the city there, the TVA is effectively a set. So there's a lot of set work here, effectively a lot of indoor working as well. So, but I don't know whether, I guess you would prefer to do it outside in COVID. So I'm not too sure, the practices or necessarily what we were given was impacted by COVID. Possibly some of the scenes were done in a way like sitting down. Yeah. Possibly. But I think, they don't broach that in here. So it's really difficult to know because at the same time, I think the whole series as is a much more, when I say personal, I don't mean personal in the sense of like how Wanda was dealing with her grief, but this is a much more, it feels kind of like,
low key.
Just low. That's not funny. And just the, it is about his, I'm going to give up on that because I don't know whether I can explain it, but this was more personal, I think.
Yeah, no, we agree. Yeah.
Well, let's give it to Kate Herron. Exactly what she says. This show is about self-love. It's about finding love for yourself, for one individual character. This show is all about Loki himself. I think Tom Hiddleston says Loki's biggest battle has always been with himself, and in this show is all about learning to love himself. So it's all about one central character. So of course it's easier to break that down. I wouldn't imagine that you could do Falcon and the Winter Soldier with just the two of them talking to one or two other people. That show had to be all about big battles with lots of people, because that's an action show. You know, this show can be much more introspective and can be much more about in one or two individual characters. They may have pared down things like, you know, when there's an interview going on between Mobius and Loki, that could have had 7 or 8 guards in there, and they just went, well, we don't actually need the guards. We'll just put the two of them in a room and lock the door.
Yeah, exactly.
Things like that. But I don't think it affected the overall product. But I think you're right. You could probably point at it and go, this was a COVID production, because it feels more like a stage play at times, where there's only a few people on indoor sets, which are all locked down.
Yeah.
In my head, episode 1, the actual TVA, the courtroom, the queue system, that way he kind of is being processed. Like, you would think in a pre-pandemic world, those would be full.
Well, you saw the concept art of the queuing system, which had even had Rocket Raccoon sitting in one of the scenes. Yeah. So they had this whole room that's supposed to be full of people. It's a much funnier joke to only have 2 people who have to take tickets, and one of them has dropped his ticket and gets wiped from existence effectively for not following the "you must have a ticket" rule. It's a much funnier joke, but probably wouldn't have been there had we had 20 people in the room.
Speaking of 20 people in a room, though, let's move on to variant number 2, which is the overall cast.
Yeah.
Yes, I of all the makings of, this is the most cast heavy. You know, looking at the characters along this hour of the making of, and in some ways, I actually really enjoyed this, because I think I love the character development here of Loki, but seeing all the other Lokis having Mobius introduced, because as well, when you think about it, there's actually a lot of character introductions here. You know, if you think of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we know those characters. Yeah. It's a metamorphosis of what they changed to. And you have Zemo as well. We've seen a lot of those characters in WandaVision. The 2 central characters, very familiar. Yeah. But it's more about the mystery, even though it is nice seeing, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. in space and all the members of the little town that Wanda has locked herself away in. But here, it's more, there's big character introductions here. Yeah. And I thought this was quite good. I enjoyed the character-centric element of this.
I liked it. It felt like the impetus for this making of was about explaining the story and explaining the journey the characters went on. I didn't feel that as much in the last 2 making ofs. I felt like they were kind of going, we have these massive action sequences, we've got to explain the stunts and how those were done, and those kind of setups in Falcon the Winter Soldier and in WandaVision. I felt like they were talking about story, but they were also talking about the production of making TV shows through the decades, for example. Lots of extra stuff to talk about. I felt here they were talking to the cast about their roles so they could explain the story for people who didn't pick up the full story in the 6 episodes, because they felt it was quite complex, and the impetus was to go there rather than to go to how they did the CGI work, how they created the planets that they went to and the places that they went to. I felt there was a lot of that was excised so they could talk about the characters and cast. But I love this cast. Like, there's some great moments, just little riffs with different members of the cast. I love Richard E. Grant in here is really good fun in the moment that he has in there. Still think that suit sometimes does look like Kermit the Frog.
Well, I must say I loved it when he said, I'm playing like, you know, the original Loki introduced in the comics, and you know, he thinks he's going to get a muscle suit. I thought that was really fantastic, because I think we would all quite like a muscle suit, Richard. Of course. And in the end, he's put it in the Lycra. He does remind me of Hugh Laurie from like Blackadder as well, as the Prince Regent.
Yeah, can see that.
Just the legs, because long legs, quite spindly, and I just think it is perfect. So I really like that, and I did like the riff he had with Tom Hiddleston, where you know, Tom was explaining why they chose him, and he just kind of looks over to him and says, because I'm old. Because I'm old. And it's like, I just thought they were really nice moments.
I love the touch of showing the concept art with Richard E. Grant drawn into it.
Yes.
Like saying that
Yes.
this was the person they were looking for originally. I presume they never would have shown that art if they'd had to go to Hugh Grant or if they'd had to go to Hugh Laurie or something like that. Well, we didn't get Richard E. Grant, but I know that looks like his face. We'll change it.
No, exactly. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
And I liked, Owen Wilson's bit as well, because, you know, revelation to me. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, I'm seeing this film because of Owen Wilson, but I loved him in this.
Yeah.
I loved the chit chat. You know, I loved the riff on the William Shakespeare where you have, you know, Tom Hiddleston's politeness saying, well, have you ever played Hamlet? And he's like, I don't think Ben Stiller would ever have asked me, have you ever played Shakespeare? And even that, you know, he says, well, if I did one, it'd be The Two Gentlemen of Verona, which Tom Hiddleston links in at the end, which I thought was quite nice, into kind of his parting piece of the making of. And also, you know, just the idea of, Owen Wilson asking Tom Hiddleston is, well, why do you like to play Loki? You know, what do you do to do it? But what is it about him? And about, you know, he plays all the keys on the piano. He's got the heavy dark notes and the lighter notes, the sharp and the flats. And so those were really great reference. So I loved all, of this interaction between the two, because I think the things that we've mentioned, on the previous two Marvel makings of is maybe that there wasn't enough of the characters chatting on set, actually. So that, I mean, it didn't maybe sort of strip down the CGI as much, but I think it focused very much on the characters. And again, I think it's reflective of, in a sense, you know, a lot of talking, a lot of character pieces together speaking. And having Sophia Di Martino coming in as well, and, you know, seeing the stunt work that she has with Renslayer as well. I mean, even just pulling Renslayer, you know, you could argue slightly, you know, not a lot of screen time, but they were kind of reflecting on how her importance of being, you know, that bad, the antagonist effectively.
Yeah, that's something I really enjoyed, hearing the script writers, the executive producers talking about the fact they really needed to ground the show with Renslayer. That's why she was so important in the show. And you do see that twist in her towards the end of the series, and you see that she's going to go on to do something in the future in series 2 probably. But that's really important when you've got this abstract idea of 3 aliens that control the TVA. You need to also have somebody else, another focal point. I thought that was a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
And also, we mentioned the best moment for Wunmi Masaku, or as Hunter B-15 in the series. And I loved hearing her talk about that moment, saying that was to do with a lot of religious people and what they go through when they have revelations about their own religion and their reaction to loss. And that's where she's coming from that scene. And as we said, in that moment where she finds out the TVA is all lies, her reaction in that moment was one of the best moments, I think, of the season, was that just because it was wordless and it was all written on her face. I loved hearing that kind of moment, because a lot of this stuff with cast interviews that can come across really upbeat and no detail behind it. So I think having those little moments with the cast, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. Yeah.
No, I agree. Like every aspect of this and that was character driven, I think, is the best way I can describe it. The interviews were character driven in that they were giving us the glimpse of why they chose to do what, where, how, when, and regarding the characters. So, like, the biggest fun joke for me was, like, Owen Wilson's head on Captain America's body. And when he was like, they came with me to do Steve Rogers and I turned them down. So, all that was the fun. Seeing Sophia Di Martino talk about her costume and then how she had to breathe so that she could move and do the things that she could do as a character. So you do every now and again hear of actors who come in, do the part and get the hell out. That did not seem to be the case. And these aren't filmed in a press junket where the actors are, hey, go all smiles and tell us about your favorite part of this. It was very much, it seems to be a lot of it was filmed in the moment of recording and during the sets, and even just seeing, and I'll move it on to the next point in a second, but even just seeing the behind the scenes filming of some of the key scenes, where we had like the two Lokis, or Loki and Sylvie, and then another key character. Seeing that and seeing them break character and then sit down and discuss it and then jump back was just fantastic to see that interactions, that character-driven interactions.
Yeah. Well, I think we can press on to variant 3, which is the casting of Jonathan Majors as Kang, He Who Remains.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting one, just to keep him separate from everybody else, I suppose, because he only had one episode, but as we know from talking about the series, it's going to roll out into something massive for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, separately from this making of, and I was kind of hoping it was going to be in here as well, but Kate Herron has mentioned that he was cast for this role. She was looking for the role of He Who Remains, had looked at Jonathan Majors for that role and thinking he'd be perfect in that position. And then Kevin Feige came back to her after she had pretty much set up this character and said, actually, we'd like to set up Kang in the future, and Jonathan Majors would be perfect for that role. Do you think these two could work together somehow? And they kind of created it that way. I think that's really interesting. So it seems like, I don't know whether you'd ink the dotted line from some of the discussions that Jonathan Majors has on this show and his performance. But it seems like he'd been approached for the role, and then when combined with Kang, it sounded really interesting to him. I love when he talks about it. We mentioned it last week that the character we saw at the end of Loki is going to be very different from any other version of this character that we see in anything in the future.
Yeah.
I love that he says that that's playing in to his performance, that he's performing this way, knowing that the next time he comes back to play a character like this in the MCU, it'll have to be completely different. He'll have to use loads of other things in his box of tricks as an actor. Another really tiny interesting point from Jonathan Majors this week, where he said he was originally a trained clown. And that's what some of the tricks he used in these scenes, and some of the moments that he used in these scenes. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I like the idea of his costume as well, where he was saying he had kind of, the sandals were Roman, his cape was Victorian. I thought that was all really kind of nicely done. I mean, it's difficult to know, isn't it? But it's just, you don't necessarily get it when you see, the actor playing the role on the TV. And then you hear the designer, the costume designers, and how the thought process of what they took to clothe him in that role. And I thought that was really, really fascinating.
I really enjoyed this. And for all the reasons you guys have said, he is going to be fantastic in this universe. He is going to be different with each character that he plays, each iteration throughout the individual shows. We do know the only property he is now confirmed for, by the way, is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Yeah.
That is the only time he is confirmed to be coming.
Yeah.
Based on the wording in this documentary, I think you're right. I don't think it was signed, sealed, and delivered. My assumption is he will probably pop up in different forms as different variants of himself across the next couple of entries, be it post-credit scenes, or he is the doorman in a scene in Hawkeye.
Right.
I'm not saying it's something as silly as that, but you kind of, I think now that
he could be just a scientist, as we mentioned last episode. He could be a scientist that somebody goes to and he has no inclination of what's happening to him in the future. They could absolutely do that. And remember, Quantumania is where we saw the announcement that Jonathan Majors was joining the MCU. So actually, retroactively now, we know he's in Loki, so we think he's going to appear other places. But you're absolutely right, Chris. It could be just here and then in Quantumania. So But you mentioned about his costume, John. It just kind of struck me just to mention as well, just that Also, Sylvie's costume was something that she talked about, something that we didn't mention earlier on when we were talking about Sylvie. Just the idea that she has picked up a bunch of things throughout time that would represent Loki. So she does have bits of the traditional Loki costume, but she left Asgard when she was a child, and it wouldn't, of course, be the same costume because she's not.
That was the interesting thing from the designer's point of view. That effectively her costume, her clothes are an amalgam of her scavenging through the different periods to put that on. And you know, she was kind of just comparing that with Loki's, which is the one from you know, the MCU, but then ultimately he gets completely stripped down, Marvel six-pack, and then into some overalls.
Yes.
Marvel
I do want to call out as well, it wasn't in this, but we had found this out from some of the interviews as well, that her costume was also designed in such a way and fitted in such a way that as she was actually breastfeeding, she was a new mother during production.
That's right.
So congratulations, because she went straight into fight training and production straight after having her child. I don't know whether it was a boy or girl, so I'm going to call it the child. She had the child and was still breastfeeding during production. So they built a lot of it so that she could quite easily breastfeed or pump during production during the scene breaks. And I think they missed a step there as well, because that would have been, it's a nice addition, would have been into this. But I think that only came out during the overall kind of press junkets.
Yeah, I think it was the day of her first appearance. She was saying, "Isn't it wonderful to be able to be accommodated like that?" Because that wouldn't have happened in other productions. You know, in fact, there used to be clauses in productions for women in movies and TV shows where they were told you can't get pregnant during the production at all, because they wouldn't
after production and up to post-release and
in case they needed to come back, you know, kind of thing. But you know, this accommodation of everybody involved in the production, you know, it's as I say, so much of this took place after COVID as well, that there must have been a lot of accommodation that had to happen for everybody going on. But I think that's a really good point, Chris. That was a great inclusion from the costume designer here.
Yeah, definitely. Look, moving on to variant 4 now. This is the magical realization by Kate Herron that the void that she had constructed in her mind, the location where they went is England. It is. The void is England. And I thought this was really interesting that as her and, you know, her colleagues were walking where they were filming, it was, you know, on this grassland with the trees. It was overcast. That suddenly she realized, yes, it's England. So I thought that was pretty funny.
I've just described my home.
Exactly.
In America, you know, and she points out, you know, with Sophia Di Martino, with Tom Hiddleston, with Richard E. Grant, all three members of those cast in that location, and they're all British going, this reminds me of home.
Well, I guess Boris Johnson's Alias then, the devourer of everything. But again, it's, you know, one of the few outdoor locations. I know we get the Gobi Desert, there's outside of Roxcart and so on, the Renaissance Fair as well. But you know, this they're quite small. This is a lot within this setting, and I loved her description about it was almost, you know, she wanted to have these things dropping in like we saw, that it was almost a bit like a bric-a-brac type yard with just things left over and that had come through and were just rotting away, like the barber shop, all these different things. I thought it was really, really good. And I think as well, I think the sets here, I mean, I really enjoyed their description of the sets. You know, a lot of indoor sets here. There was the, you know, the courtroom, There was the deli line, as I like to call it, in the TVA.
Yeah.
Which everyone seemed to be saying, I like the description that the lights were like a load of eyeballs watching you. I thought that was pretty creepy.
The ceiling was low to make a room feel
exactly.
impressive.
Yeah. The Renslayer's office, or the library, all these different things.
Yeah.
And certainly the big one being, the city of Sharu there on Lamentis, where it was done outside but had to take the 360-degree shots that both the director Kate Herron and her director of photography Autumn Gerald Arkapour were designing. I mean, they said it took a year for them to sort of plan, work with the set designers on how it should look, how it should feel in relation to how they were going to track through on that one shot, which in fact wasn't a one shot. So that was really, really fascinating. And again, just with the designers being brought in here, I always loved this part where, we kept talking about, the sci-fi sort of 1960s where they were taking that aesthetic where they were referencing Mad Men, but also, sort of touchstones with Terry Gilliam's Brazil, which is, about bureaucracy, the Kafkaesque element, the brutalism, and modernism, all that kind of stuff, all these different references, as well as Beetlejuice as well.
Of course.
So like really interesting, all this around the different locations and sets that were brought in here as well.
The Afterlife Agency in Beetlejuice. I like this. There's one set missing that I really, really wanted to see. And I think there might be a reason why we didn't see it. Right? I work in an office, right? So I don't really need to see what a TV show's version of an office is, because they did a really good job recreating an office and recreating an oppressive office environment, because that's kind of what an office feels like sometimes. I've seen them. What I wanted to see was the lair of Kid Loki, because that was built of all of the stuff that was dropped in the void. And I think if you had the production designer breaking that down, that's where you would have gone, oh, that's something that might be in an upcoming MCU movie, or that was in another MCU movie, so we stuck it here in the background. Because they said they did loads of Easter eggs on in the void, and I was like, get your camera and show us some of those Easter eggs that we didn't see. Like, I know some of them were CGI, of course, but show us some of those Easter eggs and talk through those, because I
wish they had done that too.
I don't really need to see the courtroom, because I saw that on the show and it looks like a courtroom and it was fine. I like the idea that they had to make sure that there was the representation of the timekeepers in lots of places to show they were always watching. I thought that was a great touch. The eyeballs in the ceiling, as you say, makes it feel really oppressive and stuff like that. I thought that was some interesting insights. But the one I really wanted to see was that set of Kid Loki's palace, I guess, or all the Loki's palace. Still haven't worked that one out.
There was that and the Citadel, I think, as well. That would have been really good to see, I think. And just quickly, I was very interested that they did CGI vertical office blinds. I was like, okay, they do that? I just thought it'd be easier to put some real ones in.
Yeah.
That was so weird.
Yeah, no, interesting enough, one of the things I've learned from a friend of mine who's in the space is that they actually do some of those as CGI, because the lighting casts a weird shadow when it's actually physical, and they don't want that there that so they can control the lighting and the shadows more when it is fake.
That's such a weird thing, because you think, filming in offices is something that we've done for 50 or 60 years. But sure, we'll stick up. So we've got some Marvel budget, so we'll stick it in there. That was actually really disappointing to me, because when they were doing the layering up in the office, when Gugun Batharal was in the room telling you and showing you around the office, they did the layering up so that the green screen behind, and then they layered in that amazing cityscape that they've created with CGI, and then stuck blinds over the top of it so you can't see the cityscape. I was like, why would you have an office with a window if you couldn't look out over that amazing cityscape all the time? But that's just me. It
was even the library. The library was like a lot of the background, and which I thought, because it was filmed in a way with some of the elevators, I was like, oh no, maybe that was the office building there's a very famous office building that they filmed the glass elevator scenes in.
Right.
I thought that was just a different view on that, and I was like, no, that turned out to be completely fake. On Kid Loki's lair, yeah, that's a season 2 pull because they were very adamant of we put so many cool Easter eggs. I'm like, ugh. So they had a lot of ones that they just didn't even call out, like Throg or the Living Tribunal, like statue, or one of the statues from Thor Ragnarok, or the Thanos copter. Fun ones that we all saw and we all caught up, and it's out already across multiple kind of nerd YouTube shows, and like everyone's called it out. So they could have gotten away with just even pointing to some of those. And my only thoughts on this is that the reason they didn't is, like you said, it is season 2, because you've still got the boastful Loki, you got Kid Loki alive and well at the moment in this multiverse.
But I'm even thinking, is there going to be a moment? Because they continually said that they don't want people to have to have seen these shows and then go to the movies. But they want to reward people a little bit here and there, people that have watched them. So I'm wondering, for example, that barbershop, a completely innocuous building sitting in the background in the void, but we've now seen it. So if in Ant-Man and the Wasp, they go to a barbershop and you go, that's the barbershop that was in the background of Loki. That could be a bit of fun. Where I wonder where there are a few Easter eggs like that were in the background from upcoming productions, from movies that were in production. That's all. But one other tiny thing to mention, the 4 statues that are in the Citadel at the end of time, one statue cracked and broken. Production designer has said we will find out what that is in the future, and she's not allowed to talk about that future at all. So we'd speculated that was just simply Jonathan Majors, effectively the same statue that we saw in the TVA. It's now been replaced. He's there in whatever guise, Kang, or whatever else you want to call him. But she said she's not going to say at the moment. We will find out about that in the future. That probably means it's Kang. But anyway.
No. So I think this is the thing that I got wrong. This is that the 4th timekeeper, who was exiled into Egypt, who became the Siwa, and became He Who Remains, and was the Siwa of something, he's a timekeeper kind of alien.
Okay. Yeah. But interesting, again, they didn't talk about that in the show. That's from another interview that happened during the week this week. There's been so many interviews after the show finished.
Yeah, and those 2 statues, as you came into the Citadel, you could see the face on them, and it was a clock of, like, Miss Minutes on the face, which was interesting as well. And I think segueing into our variant 5 here is, I guess, 2 omissions. And one is, where is Miss Minutes? And a bit like with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we didn't really get anything around the music, and how that was constructed. So far it's only really been WandaVision, where it's really been focused on, because of the very different, musical intros with the same theme, the different styles, as well as, the monsters, Agatha all along. But, certainly here, there was no mention of Miss Minutes. Again, maybe with the season 2, it could spoil something, possibly.
That's definitely, Miss Minutes will be back, absolutely. But to not talk about the character at all, this is a cartoon character walking around in the screen of a TV show for the entire series, like Roger Rabbit, let's say, for the older, fans amongst us. But to not mention the character at all, like there was merchandise coming out for Miss Minutes after episode 1. They knew how it was going to hit. And to not actually even mention the character, I thought was really surprising. Like there's even a moment where they have, Tom Hiddleston playing with a lamp that's supposed to represent Miss Minutes, but they don't even mention that. Oh, this is what it's like filming with this CGI character, or this character, who's not here, which everybody always does when they're talking about a character that's not on screen is replaced after the filming. It just felt really weird to completely leave her out.
Yeah, it did.
Of the show. I don't know. That was my feeling on it. But I do think they need to come back on this stuff. It feels like now we're 3 series in. They've done a making of each of them. Hey, just give us another half-hour episode about the music, as well. Like that.
The music of the MCU. And you could do the kind of, you could talk about all the different composers and get them in a room.
Potentially that too, but I think having an individual 20-minute episode where you interview the musician and the person who's created the soundscape for the show, where I've seen other interviews with Natalie Holt, who did all the music for this show, where she talks about why she chose certain instruments to represent certain characters and certain scenes, and the overall show. There's an aesthetic that she's built within the show that, if you're a fan of the score, it's as important as the dialogue. It's as important as the framing from the director. And to exclude it now from those three shows, the score at least, I know, as you say, in WandaVision, we got a bit of the songs, to exclude it and not give a little bit of focus on it when you have a platform where you can do it, I think is a big omission. I would like to see them come back and add those for each of the shows into the making of sections for assembled.
Well, that's it. I mean, she used a theremin, and Moog keyboards. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that could have been discussed there.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And could be massively interesting. It informs some of the characters and informs how the characters are perceived for the audience. So I think there's lots to talk about from a composer side. Luckily, we do have Matthew Murdoch, who explained a lot of that to us in some feedback earlier on in the season.
Exactly. For me, one of the key pieces that I felt we were missing was the overall breakdown of the story and how they got there. It's kind of more of the pre kind of research aspect, which I would like to see, because we saw that in, I think, the WandaVision, where they did talk about like some of the comic books they pulled from. I would have liked to see that a bit more, because we heard it. We definitely saw it with Matt Chapman when he kind of went on Fat Man Beyond with Mark Bernard and Kevin Smith.
Well,
He went into the detail, but then it was in that making of as well, to a degree. Like, it wasn't as deep, but that's something I find so interesting, and especially for anyone probably watching this making of. Yeah. Like, outside of the people who are just kind of probably maybe not into the making of, the behind the scenes aspect, more just the actual there for the story and the show. This, I thought, would have been interesting. Like, oh, well, look, we dived into his kind of comic book aspects here and here and here, and we kind of pulled parts of, like explaining, like, we wanted Kid Loki because of X, Y, Z, or we had this, like, the kiss heard around the Nexus multiverse. Like, where the kiss nearly heard. Aspect where it kind of spiked, explaining why it spiked into near Nexus event when they just nearly kissed, and then when they did kiss, there was no Nexus event.
I definitely agree with that. You know, where some of their reasoning came from, how it sort of linked back, say, to, as we saw the Ancient One describing to Hulk, you know, about the branches, all of that. And I think, you know, it's interesting, you know, Michael Waldron was here in this making of, but very small amount of information, and actually kind of a lot of it focused back to Kate Herron's pitch, actually, her sort of what they were describing as her shock and awe pitch, and then very much keeping it very high level, I think, as well, about, you know, how this was a journey of discovery for, you know, Loki, because, as you mentioned in our first variant, you know, his biggest battle has always been within himself. And, you know, the show is about learning to love himself, which again, you know, was addressed in here about,
biblical sense.
About the, you know, the love story here between Loki and Sylvie. And I think, and certainly I would agree with you there, Chris, you know, that linking in with the comics, and where they were getting that from, I think, from the lead writer would have been really good as well. A bit more from the lead writer would have been really good.
I think the massive challenge that they have is that they pulled so many elements from so many different comics rather than from a Loki run and translating it to TV like we've had in the past with a lot of the movies. You know, things like Civil War was a run of the comics, but completely different to what's on screen. But they can't just point at one and go, that's what we did, and now it's and changed it for TV, or at least they didn't on the show. But did you see that Kate Herron did the cardinal sin of going of what we exclude from our podcast, the word obviously, where she said, "Oh, the reason why Mobius has the mustache because obviously the character in the comics does," and we're going, what do you mean, obviously? So they did show a little screenshot there, but no, I get what you mean. I think it was just because they were talking about the themes rather than the overall storyline. And I think possibly, executive producer, Michael Waldron, is too busy with his duties over on Doctor Strange and the
I
Multiverse
guess
of Madness.
so. Yeah.
There you go. Everything does lead to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
All roads lead to the multiverse of.
We don't normally do a defend on the making of episodes because they are documentaries and they are just there for our pleasure, learning different things. But overall thoughts on the documentaries, Chris? What do you think?
I enjoyed it. It's a different version. It was a different take on the making of, so it was more narrative driven and more kind of scripted. Obviously it's all scripted, but if you can understand what the narration opening with Tom Hiddleston, the kind of the journey of how Loki got to where he is, and I did enjoy some of it. I'm not going to lie. It was a solid behind the scenes making of. Again, I think probably just an insatiable hunger at the moment is I wanted to know more and kind of understand some of it, because it is also the first one where we got a season 2. So I would like to see a bit more, anything on that, more on the story and just overall. But again, I suppose a lot of that they can't discuss because maybe some of it's on the cutting room floor that's being pulled in for season 2. Who knows? So yeah, overall enjoyed it. I would highly recommend if anyone's interested in Loki or making of, this is kind of required viewing. Derek, what did you think of it?
Yeah, it was grand. Okay, making of. It's great to give the people behind the scenes their due, and I just think by expanding that a bit more, you give even more praise to the people behind the scenes. You know, like we were kind of spoiled on Disney Plus by getting the episode by episode Mandalorian breakdown that we got with season 1 of The Mandalorian, where, you know, the writers got to have their day in the sun telling people why they wrote things the way they did. Directors got that. The behind the scenes people all got moments where they were able to share their passion for what they were producing. And this felt a little bit like, I don't know, we've been covering TV and movies for such a long time. We get, electronic press kits effectively, which is either a PDF of information about things that happened on the show that can be talking points for you, or videos that are just direct to camera that you can use for press pieces that you want to do. And this felt much more like an electronic press kit than it did a making of. I didn't learn a huge amount out of it. It was nice to see the behind the scenes stuff. It was nice to have it being led by Tom Hiddleston. I think that was a good choice for this show as opposed to the previous 2 shows because it's so personal for that character. But overall, I think there's a lot more that I'd love if they had uncovered. So, and I absolutely wish they'd do something on the music of the Marvel Cinematic Universe on TV. I'd love if it came back on that. How about yourself, John?
Nothing too much more to add, really. I think it's worthwhile to watch. It certainly feels more promotional, and really taking you through the overall story, like we did on the episodes. I think, as we've discussed it here today, I think there's a lot out of it that hasn't been put in that should have been. I hadn't really clocked on all of it, to be honest, but I think, missed minutes, the music, the comic references, and maybe that's partly down to there being a season 2, possibly. Who knows? Maybe it is down to the reveal of Jonathan Majors as Kang, almost. But I mean, that can still be kind of, we drew from loads of different comics because of all the Lokis. You just say that and just show a few of them. You don't have to go. It's not a lecture on it. It just needs to be sort of some interest there. So it's definitely worthwhile. There's some good stuff here on the characters. I much preferred the character interaction here on this one compared to the others. You really got a sense of them having their role there. And I enjoyed the set stuff that we got here. I'm always weak at the knees for that. I just think if you're going to do these, do them properly, and give these people that are behind the scenes, like the designers, like the musicians, like the even the writer in this case, a bit more time to breathe, to say, where their vision came from. But it's certainly worthwhile, to watch. And I would recommend it for sure.
Absolutely. I'd also recommend going checking out some of the other interviews that have been done over the last week with the cast and people behind the scenes. There's some great insights that have come out that I kind of hoped were in here. And it's a real shame. I don't know whether we mentioned it last week, whether the news had been out that Kate Herron's not coming back for season 2 of the show. So it's great to hear her vision and how much it played into season 1. We may get a very different show next time when season 2 comes back with a different person at the helm, since it sounds like she had quite a big input on the first season.
I am hoping that maybe she got offered something crazy by Marvel, a separate film, and that is why she is not coming back, because the production on that is taking her away. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to know or say until that tidbit is revealed.
She does say she has a lot of projects on the way, some that she was working on before Loki and some that have been brand new to her. So I am sure we'll hear something very soon from Kate Herron. But right now, as the heat is climbing to sweltering, I think it's time for a drink over the pub, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
John, let's go to the pub quiz. We got some answers to some questions, and we've got some goodies to award.
Yes, he's got the questions, we've got the answers, and more importantly, there's liquid in the air.
Yes. Again, great stuff, fellow quizzers and fellow defenders, for all your answers coming in. A bit of a toughie, as I said at the start of the podcast, this time. A few questions that, were a bit difficult to pinpoint the exact numbers or identify where to look within the show to get the right answer. Yes. But that is the fun of it, after all. Absolutely. Fellow quizzers and, dare I say, amateur detectives in this case.
Absolutely, it wouldn't be a quiz if it was really easy to get every answer to the question.
Yeah, but let's get on with the answers. So, episode 1. We asked, what speed is Loki moving at after being clobbered by Hunter B-15 in the Gobi Desert? The answer to that is 1/16th speed, but he does feel all the pain that you would feel in real time.
Classic
we were double checking what speed it was, and it still made me chuckle, that image of the slow mode, Loki, mouth wobble as he had gotten clobbered. So it was 1/16th speed.
Absolutely. The episode 2 question, when was Kablooey chewing gum sold? Only sold regularly on Earth from 2047 to 2051. So the years 2047 to 2051. I did get one great, response to this, on email, which said, I think we're actually probably going to see it a lot earlier than that in the real world, considering the reaction. We're probably going to see Kablooey chewing gum sold in the next year or two.
For episode 3 of Loki, Lamentus, we had the question, Loki and Sylvie are taking the train to the Ark, but where on Lamentus 1 is the Ark located? Very simple. The answer is Sharu.
Yes, in the making of, we saw that exact place being built, so it was mentioned about 15 times, the name of it, but it was only mentioned once, I think, on the episode.
Yes, the city of Sharu there.
Let's get on to the contentious questions. Question 4, question 5. Jordan?
Yes, episode 4. We asked, before returning to Sylvie, Hunter B-15 sees a poster on the wall. What does it ask, and what is the answer? So the poster says, did you get them all? ? Verify thorough deletion. That was the answer. Did you get them all? Verify thorough deletion.
Tough.
Yes.
Yes, we had quite a lot of verify through deletion.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Verify thorough deletion. So yes, making sure the agents do their full duty there.
Yes.
Yeah. On to question 5. Ooh, this one is a tough one. In episode 5, how many Lokis do we see in the episode in the void at the end of time? Not just together. This is a difficult one. There were 16 Lokis in the episode. We had President Loki, Classic Loki, Kid Loki, Alligator Loki, Boastful Loki, our variant Loki, of course, Sylvie, and 9 supporting Lokis who were with President Loki. So there are 16. Oh, we got answers all over the board here. Some people leaving out Sylvie and Loki. Some people leaving out the supporters of President Loki. And
yeah, this was a toughie. Even originally, when we asked the question, we did think that President Loki, that the other 9 Lokis around him were just supporters.
Yeah. They were just dressing like him.
So, yes, it's only watching it back. We then counted that up, and it was verified in the making of as well. So, yes.
Handlebars Loki for the win.
Absolutely.
Cosplayers around the world went, yes,
Can you ride
my budget
him?
has gone down.
Still Alligator Loki for the win.
Oh, of course, but that's different. That's who he'll always be for the win. Gentlemen, it's time to go on to the final question. Episode 6 for all time, always. The question we ask is, how many sugars does Loki get in his coffee in the Citadel at the end of time? Yes, the answer is 2 lumps. Very British. 2 lumps of sugar and a splash of milk. Chum, thank you very much.
Wow, that's your British accent. And you've known...
And I'm actually half British.
And
that's the scary
Yeah,
thing.
and you've known John for, 14 years as well?
Oh, pish posh. It's fine.
You could have been in Mary Poppins with that
I
accent.
could have been in Black Widow with that accent.
There you go.
But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, defenders of all ages. Those are our 6 questions. Those are the 6 answers. And we now need to pull the answer.
Once again, lots of entrants to the pub quiz. Thanks so much to everybody that's entered. Interestingly, this time, for the first time ever, there was nobody with all 6 correct answers.
I know.
Yeah.
Defenders.
Shocker.
We do have 6 people who got 5 questions right, and they do vary. Not everybody got the same question wrong, which is what's interesting. Not everybody got just the number of Lokis. There were a few on the verify through deletion, and there were a few others on years, etc. So we have 6 people in for the draw for those goodies. We have Salima Kisler, Dr. Bob Phillips, Victor Sellers, Catherine Collars, Will B, and Will Walton.
Yes, so we will be putting you into the electronic hat that is Google. Chris, do your techno wizardry.
Fine, I can do that. Hey Google, choose a number randomly between 1 and 6.
Here's a random number.
1. 1. Ha 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 ha.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Google. We can announce the person with the most correct answers as chosen in the techno tombola that is Google is Salim Akisla. So well done, Salim there.
Well done, Salim.
We will be in touch to ask where we can send the goodies, but also which of the selection of goodies that we have on our website you would like.
There you have it.
Well done, Salim. We did mention during the season that we were having some issues getting some goodies for Loki because they were being released much later than the show was airing. What you're getting for winning the pub quiz, Salim, is your choice of 3 Loki Funko Pops. The choices on offer, we have Mobius, we have Ravonna Renslayer, we have Loki himself, of course, we have Sylvie, and we have Hunter B15. You tell us which 3 of those 5 you want, and we will get them out to you as soon as they're released. And I'll be in contact with you by email. Well done, Salim.
Congratulations, Salim, and we hope you enjoy the fruits of your labour.
Yes, a big congratulations, Salim. Great stuff, and thanks to everyone for getting involved in the Loki pub quiz for this season. Great stuff. Now, just to round out the podcast, it is our feedback section with your lovely comments, observations that we weren't able to put into the last episode in time, and some that have come in since. First up, we have an email through from Will B. Will says, "Hello, mates. I've not chimed in this season, but I thought I would send in a few thoughts for your wrap-up episode. Really, really great writing this season. It's really hard to believe we got so much depth from Sylvie Loki in only 6 episodes. The show also lacked the pacing problems its 2 predecessors had. This may be recency bias at work here, but if I had to rank episode 6 as a standalone content in the MCU, I honestly would only rank it behind Winter Soldier and Thor Ragnarok. Never has the MCU nailed a villain reveal as well as they did with He Who Remains. The endless possibilities of this variance in future projects has me more pumped than I ever have been about the future of the MCU. Jonathan Majors is a bona fide star now, and I can't wait to see him as Kang. Mm-hmm. Lastly, a question or theory. Everyone seems to be hung up on the emotional aspect of Mobius not remembering Loki because they obviously built a special friendship over the series, and it's sad to see that not exist anymore. But I was really thinking about the implications of a universe where Loki might not exist at all. If they don't recognize Loki, either he doesn't exist in that universe he was sent to, or there, he isn't a variant on the TVA's radar. Mm-hmm. If he isn't what caused the Nexus event, I'd be curious to know what did. It was a wild ride, and I enjoyed your coverage this season as always. Looking forward to what if will be. Yeah, thanks so much, Will. Absolutely, could not agree with you more about Jonathan Majors.
So yep.
Really good. And you're right, as a villain reveal, even in the in the MCU, a lot of villains maybe it was thought they weren't given enough time to sort of become even more villainous. But I think here, this is a really interesting sort of reveal in the TV, knowing he's coming into a movie, and just how they went about it with that almost stage play of him in his office at the Citadel, at the edge of time. So really good.
Certainly nobody could say that he didn't have the opportunity to explain his motivations.
Nope.
Well done, Jonathan Majors. Yeah, absolutely excellent. Thanks so much, Will. Love the fact that you rank this somewhere behind Winter Soldier and Thor Ragnarok. Winter Soldier being my favourite movie, and Thor Ragnarok being close to the end of the 25 Marvel movies should be. So I guess this is somewhere in the middle then? No, thanks so much, Will. I know my thoughts on Thor Ragnarok are different from a lot of people. We've also got an email here from Jerry. He says, "Hey guys, the behind the scenes of Loki is the best of the Marvel documentaries. Tom Hiddleston is passionate about being Loki. That passion infects all those around him. The knowledge we get from costume and set design is great. Richard E. Grant, absolutely wonderful. The one thing in this documentary that's so disappointing, not one mention about the music. The soundtrack of the show was a character to itself. Hearing Tom Hiddleston say Kang was all I needed though. Can't wait to talk about the What If series in a month's time." Jerry in Niceville. Totally agree with you. We did mention that, Jerry. The omission of the music discussion is definitely a miss for the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jerry.
Yes, thank you so much, Jerry. And yes, Richard E. Grant is wonderful. National treasure.
International treasure now, Chris. International treasure.
Sure. International treasure that he is, but could be replaced by someone else because who knows?
No, he was drawn into the art before he was cast. Okay. Chris, he was definitely irreplaceable, without a doubt.
Irreplaceable. Next up, we also have an email from 084 who just missed our recording deadline last week. So this is about the overall series, not including this as a making of. 084 had this to say: "What a ride. I understand some people's criticism about exposition and setup. However, I have to point out some things that for me heavily outweigh any and all critiques about the episode. Jonathan Majors' performance had me hanging on every single word. If this was what we get from him going forward in the MCU, I'm somehow even more excited than I already was. Any idea for an Ireland casting now? I'm hoping we get him along with Kang in Quantumania. Scott Lang having to deal with his daughter aging 5 years in what seemed to him like 5 hours, plus her possibly dating a boy destined to become a supervillain, just sounds like a perfect example of classic dad tropes exploited by sci-fi. The moral dilemma and the conflict that sprouted from it were impeccable. Sylvie was never going to accept a position where she would do to countless others' children what had been done to her. And Loki willing to hear He Who Remains out, but for vastly different reasons than episode 1 Loki. chef's kiss. I'll cut it out there. Take care, guys, and see you for What If. Until next time, 084. Thank you so much for that feedback, 084. And casting for Iron Lad, no, I can't do that because there's so many really fantastic younger actors at this point in time. For example, like Impulse was just cast in The Flash by a fantastic young actor. But you've also got loads of them out on Netflix. You could even go down the road of the actor from Bridgerton. I can't remember his name. I think it's Jean-Paul something.
And that's Bridgerton, not the former Pope, I hope.
It is.
Yes. Excellent
Jean-Paul
stuff.
something.
Oh, right.
Now.
I missed that former Pope. He's three popes ago, isn't he?
Yeah,
John,
three popes
John
ago.
Paul II. Really excellent thoughts there, I4. Yeah, I love the idea of there being a relationship between Scott Lang's daughter and possibly Iron Lad in the future. That's a great idea.
That is a great idea,
nice
definitely. Yeah, thanks so much, 084. Over on our Facebook group, Victor Seller says, I thought the intro and narration from Tom Hiddleston was very fitting and witty. Tom has great acting versatility. See The Night Manager, where he plays a hero.
Oh, yes.
Applauds to the casting as they brought together an excellent ensemble. I am in awe of the vision, conception, and collaboration of the amazing writers, producers, and director. They seem to not explicitly mention season 2. Was that not confirmed at the time? I enjoyed the quips and outtakes from all the actors. I voted 7 Lokis in the pub quiz as opposed to the other 9 Lokis not listed in the show. Credits, but directly referred to in the documentary. C'est la vie. All in all, it's a great ride. Thanks so much, Victor. Certainly, The Night Manager was great. And if anyone's interested in seeing the TV series, and more from Tom, it's a really good one, to see. I really as well like the quips and outtakes, as you say. I really enjoyed, I guess from this documentary, that focus, on the characters, and their interaction on set. I thought that was a good positive from this documentary, for sure. And certainly we were having problems counting the Lokis as well.
Well, don't worry, Victor. You still made it in.
Yeah.
To the group, that was in for the chances of winning those goodies. It doesn't matter whether you get one wrong. There are still 5 other questions to get right, to get into these. We will be back, I presume, with our pub quiz on What If, right?
Certainly.
Because we're not doing one on Bad Batch, but I presume we'll do another one when we get to What If.
I think that would be really good. And there may even be 10 questions on the Doctor Strange one on its own.
I think if we get a Doctor Strange pop, they're releasing the images of the What If pops at the moment. And there's a very cool one for Doctor Strange. Yeah, I had a feeling that John will just ask 10 questions. If you get them all right, you get the pop. If you don't get if you get one of them wrong, he gets to keep it, I think.
Yeah.
Might be the way.
It's a John off.
There you go. Might be that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for all the feedback. If you want to send any thoughts about Loki to us, we're happy to hear from you. Just email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or come join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. Why not give us a follow over on Instagram or on Twitter? We're there at TV Podcast Industries or at TV Pod Industries on Twitter. And of course, make sure you stay subscribed to the podcast. Come follow us over on TV Podcast Industries. You'll find all the places where we are. Just search TV Podcast Industries and you can keep up with us on all the other stuff that we're covering.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be continuing our coverage in a galaxy far, far away with Star Wars: The Bad Batch on Disney Plus, this coming Friday. And of course, we are going to be back in the weird, wonderful MCU and multiverses with What If, which begins again on Disney Plus, from August the 11th.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, where they got the proverbial dump truck of money and backed it up to multiple stars in the MCU's house and just said, record these lines, here you go. Just tell us when. When? No? Okay, you get the whole thing. One. And much like Oprah, everyone got one in the audience. It's going to be fantastic, guys. It's going to be a head scratcher.
I am so
alone.
for this.
One Killmonger saving Iron Man I have no idea where that's going to go.
Absolutely. There's so many interesting stories in there. We've got Marvel Zombies going to be told in there. We've got, finally got Captain Carter, in there. Peggy Carter becomes Captain Carter, I guess. Yeah, so many cool things that I just didn't expect to see on screen, and a lot of them voiced by the original actors from the MCU, which is very, very cool. Looking forward to that on August 11th. Thanks so much for joining us across all of our coverage of the MCU over the last couple of months. Been really good having our fellow defenders back, and hopefully you'll join us again in the future.
Yes, if you want to head on over to our website, tvpodcastindustry.com, you can subscribe to all of our feeds there. We strongly suggest you share it with everyone. Share it with your mother. Share it with your father. Go! Do you know what? We haven't asked you to do it in a while. Go share it with your granny, your grandpa, your oompa, your oma, and tell them how much you love this show and you love listening to us, and tell her she should watch Loki and drool all over Tom Hiddleston and then listen to us discuss.
I'm sure she'll love watching along on Loki. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Yeah, thanks so much, fellow defenders. It's been brilliant chatting to you and with you all about Loki this season. We'll be back for season 2 as well. So remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.